When a woman feels too much, the first thing she does isn't move closer, she pulls away. At first glance, her behavior looks confusing. One day she's warm, open, emotionally present. The next, she's distant, slower to respond, more guarded with her words. Most people assume this means she's losing interest, that her feelings are fading, that something changed. But in many cases, the opposite is true. What's changing isn't her emotions, it's her fear. When a woman becomes deeply emotionally invested, the intensity of those feelings can overwhelm her nervous system. She starts to feel exposed, vulnerable, emotionally visible. And for someone who's not fully comfortable with emotional intimacy, that can feel dangerous, not exciting, because strong emotions create the possibility of loss, rejection, and emotional pain. So instead of expressing more, she suppresses. Her emotions stay high internally, but her actions become more controlled. She responds less quickly, she shares less, she keeps emotional distance. Not because she doesn't care, but because she cares too much. She's trying to regulate how connected she feels so she doesn't lose emotional control. This is why emotionally invested women often appear inconsistent. The connection feels intense, so they pull back to protect themselves. It's not manipulation, it's self preservation. Her heart is moving forward faster than her emotional safety can handle. Inside, there's a conflict happening. One part of her wants closeness, the other part wants safety. And when fear wins, behavior changes before feelings do. She might stop initiating, she might act cooler, she might act busy. But emotionally, she's still deeply engaged. She's just trying not to show it. This is where most people misread the situation. They react to her distance with insecurity, they chase, they seek reassurance, they push for clarity, and ironically, that increases her fear because now she feels pressure on top of vulnerability. But when you understand what's actually happening, the pattern becomes clear. Her emotional intensity creates internal stress, and that stress shows up as withdrawal, not disinterest. She's not pulling away from you. She's pulling away from how strongly she feels about you. That's why her actions seem to contradict her emotional signals. The attraction is real, the connection is real, the feelings are real. But the fear of emotional exposure is stronger than her ability to express them comfortably. So if her emotions feel deep but her behavior feels cautious, distant, or controlled, that's not a sign of low interest. It's a sign of emotional overload. And when someone starts protecting themselves from their own feelings, it usually means the connection matters more than they're ready to admit. When she's deeply emotionally invested but afraid of getting hurt, direct communication feels too risky. Saying what she feels would mean exposing herself. Admitting interest would mean giving up emotional control. And for someone who's already overwhelmed by her own emotions, that level of vulnerability feels unsafe. So instead of expressing her feelings openly, she tests, not in a manipulative way, but in a subconscious way. She creates small emotional situations to see how you respond. She might pull back slightly and watch if you chase. She might say something ambiguous and observe your reaction. She might become a little distant just to see if you notice. These aren't games, they're emotional safety checks. Her nervous system is trying to answer one question: is it safe for me to feel this much? Because real emotional investment raises the stakes. If she cares deeply, your reactions carry more emotional weight. So instead of asking directly, she gathers information indirectly. She observes your consistency, your emotional stability, your confidence, your ability to stay grounded when things feel uncertain. This is why her tests often feel subtle. They're not dramatic, they're small shifts in behavior. A delayed reply, a moment of emotional distance, a slightly cold response. She's not trying to control you, she's trying to understand you. She wants to see if you remain calm, centered, and secure when the emotional tone changes. If you react with insecurity, pressure, or neediness, it confirms her fear. It tells her that getting emotionally closer could lead to emotional chaos, that the connection might become unstable, that she might lose emotional safety. But if you stay grounded, present, and emotionally steady, it sends the opposite message. It tells her she doesn't need to protect herself so much, that her feelings don't put her at risk, that emotional closeness won't lead to emotional loss of control. This is why testing is actually a sign of emotional investment. People don't test connections they don't care about. They test the ones that matter, the ones that feel important, the ones that carry emotional weight. She's not asking, do you like me? She's asking, can I trust what I feel with you? And because fear blocks direct vulnerability, she lets behavior speak instead of words. She watches how you handle uncertainty, how you handle emotional shifts, how you handle not being fully in control. Her tests are about emotional safety, not attraction. The deeper her feelings, the more careful she becomes, the more she evaluates, the more she monitors emotional risk. And ironically, the more invested she is, the more indirect her communication becomes. So when she starts testing instead of talking, it's not because she's unsure about you, it's because she's sure about how much she feels and she's trying to protect herself from it. And when someone starts checking emotional safety instead of emotional interest, it usually means the connection has already gone deeper than they're comfortable admitting. When a woman is emotionally invested but afraid of where her feelings might lead, her mind goes into overdrive. Every word you say, every pause, every change in tone suddenly carries weight, not because she's looking for problems, but because the outcome matters to her more than she's willing to admit. And that's when overthinking begins. Overthinking isn't a lack of interest, it's a sign that the emotional stakes are high. If she didn't care, she wouldn't analyze, she wouldn't replay conversations, she wouldn't wonder what you meant or how you felt. Indifference doesn't create mental noise, emotional investment does. The more she feels, the more her mind tries to protect her from uncertainty. So she starts reading between the lines. She wonders why you replied later than usual. She thinks about whether your tone felt different. She replays something you said and asks herself if it meant more or less than it sounded, not because you did anything wrong, but because her emotions have made her sensitive to outcomes. This is where fear enters the picture. She's not just thinking about the present moment, she's projecting into the future. What if I get attached and he pulls away? What if I invest more and lose control? What if I misread the situation and end up hurt? These questions don't come from insecurity alone. They come from caring deeply without feeling emotionally safe enough to fully surrender. So instead of relaxing into the connection, her mind stays alert. She monitors herself. She monitors you. She tries to anticipate emotional risk before it happens. And that constant mental scanning creates anxiety, not clarity. Ironically, the more she thinks, the harder it becomes for her to act naturally. She might hesitate before texting. She might rewrite messages. She might pull back slightly just to regain emotional balance. And from the outside, this can look like distance or uncertainty, when in reality, it's emotional overload. Her heart wants closeness. Her mind wants control. And when fear is present, the mind always tries to control what the heart feels. Overthinking becomes a defense mechanism, a way to stay one step ahead of potential pain, a way to manage feelings that feel too big to handle freely. This is why emotionally invested women often appear hot and cold. When she feels safe, she opens up. When fear spikes, she retreats into her head. The behavior changes, but the feelings don't disappear, they just get buried under analysis. And the more she values the connection, the more intense this pattern becomes. Because now it's not just about liking you, it's about protecting herself from losing something that matters. So when you notice her overanalyzing your words, your actions, or the direction of the connection, don't mistake it for disinterest. It's usually the opposite. It's a sign that she's emotionally engaged, but struggling to balance desire with self protection. And when someone starts thinking this much about what something means, it's because emotionally it already means more than they're ready to say out loud. When her emotions start getting stronger than she expected, one of the first instincts that kicks in is control. Not control over you, but control over the situation, control over the pace, control over how fast things are moving. Because when feelings grow quickly, the loss of emotional control feels threatening, and slowing things down becomes her way of staying safe. She doesn't do this because she's uninterested. She does it because she's very interested. Strong emotional investment creates a sense of vulnerability. The more she cares, the more she feels exposed. And exposure brings fear, fear of getting attached, fear of being hurt, fear of losing power over her own emotions. So instead of allowing the connection to unfold naturally, she starts managing it. She might suggest taking things slow. She might delay plans. She might become less available than she was before. She might pull back right when things start feeling intense. And from the outside, this can look like mixed signals. But internally, it's her nervous system trying to regulate emotional risk, because when someone feels deeply, speed becomes dangerous. The faster the connection grows, the more real the possibility of loss becomes. So she slows it down not to kill attraction, but to protect herself from the consequences of attraction. She wants the connection, but she wants it on terms that feel emotionally manageable. This is especially common when she's had past emotional pain, if she's been hurt before, betrayed before, or emotionally overwhelmed in previous relationships. Her system remembers that. And when new feelings arise, her body reacts before her logic does. It says, be careful, don't rush, don't lose control again. So she tries to control the rhythm. She might pull back after deep conversation. She might create space after a moment of intimacy. She might suddenly need more time for herself, not because you did anything wrong, but because closeness triggered emotional intensity she doesn't know how to hold comfortably. And the paradox is this: the more she tries to control the pace, the more it reveals how much she feels. People don't slow down things that don't matter. They don't regulate emotions that aren't strong. They don't manage connections that feel irrelevant. Control only appears when something feels important enough to lose. Her desire to manage the pace is really a desire to manage her own feelings. She's trying to find a balance between staying connected and staying safe, between wanting you and not wanting to get hurt, between surrendering emotionally and protecting herself. So she creates structure, boundaries, distance, timing, not to push you away, but to give herself emotional breathing room. And this is where most people misunderstand her behavior. They think slowing down means lack of attraction, but in reality, it often means the attraction is so strong that she's afraid of where it could lead. She's not saying, I don't want this. She's saying, I want this, but I'm scared of how much I want it. So when she tries to control the pace, what she's really doing is trying to stay emotionally grounded in a connection that's starting to matter more than she expected. And when someone starts managing the speed of a relationship instead of letting it fade, it's usually because emotionally they're already in deeper than they planned to be. When she goes quiet, most people assume the connection is fading, that interest is dropping, that attraction is dying. But when a woman is emotionally invested and afraid, silence often means the opposite. It doesn't mean she stopped feeling, it means she's feeling too much. Silence is what happens when her emotional system gets overwhelmed. She's processing, reflecting, regulating, trying to make sense of her own feelings, because strong emotional investment creates internal noise, thoughts, doubts, fantasies, fears, and when it all becomes too intense, she pulls inward instead of outward. This is why she might stop initiating or take longer to reply or suddenly seem distant without explanation, not because she's detached, but because she's emotionally overloaded. Her mind needs space to breathe. Her nervous system needs time to stabilize, so she creates distance to feel safe again. But here's the part most people miss even in silence. She's watching. She checks your social media. She notices your activity. She remembers your last conversation. She wonders what you're thinking. She imagines how you might be feeling. Silence doesn't mean you've left her emotional world. It just means she's interacting with you internally instead of externally. Because emotionally invested people don't disconnect, they retreat inward. She's observing how you handle the space, whether you chase, whether you panic, whether you stay calm, whether you respect the silence. And through that, she's learning whether the connection feels safe enough to return to. Silence becomes another emotional test, not of attraction, but of emotional stability. If you respond to her silence with pressure, insecurity, or constant checking, it confirms her fear. It tells her that closeness creates emotional chaos, that the connection might become overwhelming, that her feelings might spiral out of control. But if you remain grounded, present, and emotionally steady, it sends a different message. It tells her that emotional space doesn't destroy the bond, that she doesn't need to disappear to feel safe, that the connection can exist without emotional pressure. This is why her silence often ends as suddenly as it begins. One moment she's distant, the next she's warm again, engaged again, present again, because once her nervous system feels regulated, she returns, not because she forgot about you, because she finally feels emotionally safe enough to re engage. And the deeper her feelings, the more likely this pattern becomes. Intense emotions create intense regulation needs. So she goes quiet, processes, observes, then comes back when the emotional volume feels manageable again. So silence isn't detachment, it's emotional self protection. It's what happens when attraction is strong, fear is active, and vulnerability feels overwhelming. She's not pulling away from you. She's trying to create space from the intensity of what she feels about you. And when someone watches you closely, even while staying silent, it usually means you're still very much present in their emotional world, just not in a way they're ready to admit out loud.